the group we're gonna get.
I'd say.
Yeah, let's go ahead.
Get a quorum?
I think 5 is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll call a meeting to order. I've been informed by our acting secretary, who will act as, has agreed to act as secretary again today.
Oh, I just did.
That
'Cause I did
minutes
such a
were
good
not
job last
drafted, so we will pass on those, and then I
We'll get
think
both.
Kristen had indicated we owe one from the earlier in the year, so I'll dig through. I think I have notes on that somewhere, and we'll try to get the records up to date. That'll be our goal for the October 8th meeting. I apologize.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to beg to be excused shortly. I'll probably have to leave before the meeting is over.
All right.
Depending on, but it may not matter because you'll still have.
Now we've got Mr. Harrington.
You'll still have.
Mark,
Made
I haven't
it.
seen you in a
Yes.
while.
Good to
Like
see
two
you.
new hips.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Glad to have you here, Mark.
So I only have about 10 minutes, so.
All right. We'll try to get moving so that we can get Mr. Zulof's input as necessary. So,
Well, if you have any votes,
yeah, I don't know that I don't see anything on here that's going to be voted upon.
you'll still have a quorum now that Mr.
Yeah.
Harrington is here.
Yeah.
So.
So we'll turn it over to staff and the items in new business, Shoreline Park.
Yes, through the chair, I wanted you all know that that project has really been completed now. We, as everybody knows, we did the concrete around the perimeter of the western dock, or the western finger last year. We did the remainder of the perimeter this year. All of the riprap along the central finger there was completed last year as well. There were some things because of elevated construction prices that we were not able to include, which there's still really not a sidewalk to get from the south parking lot up to those areas without going through the parking area or through the drive area. So that's a goal that we have, to figure out how to connect that eventually from those ADA spots on the south and from the pavilion and those types of things. But that project is complete now. There is a pull-off area. We've been getting a lot of requests from residents and noticed that a lot of people are dropping kayaks in those fingers, and it's a little more secluded in that area than where the previous kayak drop-off was, which was closer to where the pathway meets the driveway going north. So back then, we had just moved a few rocks to give the public access, and now we did have a little pull-off area. I don't know if we put the signage up yet, but it's not a parking spot. It's really just a drop-off zone. So we did put some concrete on the south side of the steel sheet pile to protect it, and hopefully that'll be a good place, safer place for people to get down into their kayaks. So we are complete with that. If anybody has any questions.
Well, Mr. Chairman,
I noticed it. It looks nice. It seems very
Thank you.
usable.
Mr. Chairman, it looks so nice that the Ohio Erie Canal Corridor website, which runs like from Cleveland down through Canal Way, has used a picture from Shoreline Park on their cover their cover pic on their website. I don't know if they know they have, but and I don't know how old the picture is, but I did notice if you go on a desktop, not on a phone, but I first noticed it on my iPad too. That works too. But I said, wait a minute, that's Shoreline Park.
All right. Well, that's good that it's getting noticed, right?
They'd probably be embarrassed to realize that they did that, but I think we shouldn't tell them for a while.
Oh, no. Get the publicity.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Bill.
Just a note, the park made a great backdrop for the meeting last Thursday with Secretary Buttigieg and Representative Capter and Senator Portman. It was perfect day, and it was a perfect setting for that TV coverage. That's all.
Cool. All right, we'll move on to the transient marina then.
Yes, through the chair, this was the same construction project of doing concrete repairs or a little bit of work in some of the waterfront properties. It was the south side of the transient marina. We did a similar repair last year along the east side of the transient marina where we cut about a 2 to 3 foot piece at the joint that had started falling in. We pinned them back together to make sure that the concrete and everything is in place and safe, and you're not going to get a bike tire in there. That project is relatively complete. I believe we're done with all the concrete work. Also along the western side, we connected the bike path to the sidewalk around the perimeter of the drive as well. We didn't have a way to get to it except from the east side if you were in a wheelchair or had a stroller or something like that without going through the drive apron. So we also connected that. And it's not on here, but the last 2 little items that were part of that same project were a concrete pad up by the picnic area on the Jackson Street Pier. We noticed that there have been requests for food trucks up there, but that we also noticed that people were walking through the planter areas, and we wanted to make sure that we gave them a good way without having to trample some of the vegetation and those types of things. Really the catalyst for that was the vendors and those types of things that are looking at that site in the future. But it was a good idea regardless to make sure that we protected that. And then the last piece that we did as part of that, I mentioned last time, there was quite a bit of rutting on the west side of the drive entrance to the Jackson Street Pier. We were having trouble getting grass to grow. We had probably 2 inches of rutting in that area as well. We didn't widen the drive apron. What we did is we just tried to protect it and make it so that we could actually get grass to grow and make it more aesthetically pleasing. So it's not intended to allow for wider turns. We still hope people will stop and let one vehicle pull in before they pull out, which was the original intent, but people are impatient, so they tend to try to pull out as another car's coming, and it's a little tight over there, so they do drive over that grass area. So that's the full intent of that portion of the project as well. And I believe both of those projects are wrapped up. We don't have a final change order yet, but we are completed at both sites now, and I don't anticipate anything in the future unless planning and Parks and Rec come with additional projects. So.
All right, thank you. Any further questions on those projects? All right, we'll move on to any other new business that anyone has. We'll move on to old business. Justice Center.
Yes. Through the chair, the Justice Center, we have good news. I don't know if you all have heard or not, but we did accept bids about 3 weeks ago, and we plan to go to City Commission on the 12th to award that project. We got really good pricing in from a relatively local contractor. And we're hoping to be able to award that project. We don't have a schedule for construction. We don't know exactly when they're going to start, but they seem to be pretty aggressive in wanting to start as quickly as possible. So we may see mobilization sometime in October, which we're a month away. But hopefully at the next meeting, I can have a good schedule and an update for you guys as to when.
Can you tell us who that is? Can you tell us who that is yet?
Yeah, it's Mosier.
Is there plans to maintain the operations in that building, or the courts and the cops will have to move when they're?
The answer to that question, both of those questions, is yes. We are going to maintain operations throughout. The public will have access as they do now. Maybe the entrance will change when they're doing work at that location, but all of the operations will be moving within the building and shifting around throughout it as the project is moving. So, like, for example, when the actual courtroom is being worked on, we'll have to find them a new location, or we'll have to time it so that we're only doing the work in the court when they're not having court. So there's a lot of coordination and timing that's going to be needed, but it will still be in operation. And to that same point, MEGS is supposed to be completed by the end of October, so there'll be about a month overlap is what we're anticipating between the two projects. But I did see asphalt going down earlier this week already for the base, so hopefully we can just have minor surface work when the construction's going on so that there's less confusion between two projects in the same area.
Of particular interest to me, I believe the Meg Street is the polling location for 2 precincts. They will or won't be there probably in November.
I know we've had conversations on that, but I don't recall. I believe they are moving somewhere else during construction, but I'll have to check in on that and let you know. I can't recall. It might be that this year we're going to be okay, but then next in '23 we might have to move them somewhere else. I'll have to look and see.
Good point.
All right, good question. Any other questions on the Justice Center? It's good to hear that it's coming up so quickly. All right, the landing.
Yes, some exciting news here as well. I'm sure many of you have seen that in August, we acquired 5 more parcels along the pathway, the old pier track. Commission approved that, and we have finalized those agreements over the last couple weeks. So the landing, if you recall, goes from the Cedar Point Drive all the way to the park that's going to be built north of the sports center on the old Griffin Airport runway. We do intend to have a presentation giving the commission an update on those 2 projects. It's been a while through the pandemic. We did slow some things down just for funding purposes, so we intend to come back and give a presentation at some point in September, maybe the first meeting on the 12th, but it might be pushed to the 26th. So we have one more parcel to acquire, one more, not even a parcel, but one more easement or right-of-way to acquire for that pathway. And then we have what we need. We need to still move forward with doing the environmental permitting. We've done all of the environmental analysis, but we still have to move forward with the permitting. Once we finalize those 2 things, it's just taking the 70% design to 100% and moving forward. Now, one more piece, as everybody is aware, there's a large grant that was awarded by the federal government, Federal Highway Administration. That grant was obtained by ODOT with help from various local partners. ODOT has been so wonderful to work with in making sure that they are meeting the needs of the locals, not necessarily meeting their desires and everything. They're really working with everybody. It's been amazing to see. And as part of that, the landing is likely going to have to be split into 2 separate projects. One, because we did get the portion of the pathway going from Cedar Point Drive to Heminger Ditch, which includes that small side track along Route 6, included in that grant. So we are going to be managing that on a different timeline than ODOT. ODOT's schedule was 2026 They were going to break ground, and that's from the city corporation limit all the way to Huron and down to Route 2, down Rye Beach Road. That's a 26, 27, 28 timeline for them. We're trying to get our timeline to be more aggressive in the 24, 23, 24, 25 timeframe. So hopefully we can do our piece of that one, but then we also have the remaining piece, which is the boardwalk across the ditch and then the park as well. And we don't have a timeline on that yet. It's going to depend on how long the environmental takes and how quickly we can acquire that last piece of property. So.
Yes, Dave?
That ODOT thing, that's the one that includes a roundabout where Perkins hits Cleveland?
Yes.
And the working with the locals, does that involve, like, what happens to that motel there? Does that stay or go, or how does that work?
There was a planning report that was done a couple years ago, and that planning report went all the way from Sycamore Line to Rye Beach and then down Rye Beach, including Butler. And there were various components in that report, and that's what they applied for. That doesn't mean that was the final design and final layout and alignment of everything that's exactly how it's going to look, but that is what they're moving forward with and what they got funding for. And what that showed was actually, I believe, if I recall, was taking that alignment north of the hotel and putting the roundabout north of the hotel. I could be wrong. I'd have to look at that alignment, but I thought it had it going north of the hotel and back around. And the big thing is that the stacking of vehicles is what is the huge problem there, because you're going 55 down that, well, hopefully you're going 55 down that road. Most people are going 65 or 70, and then somebody's just dead stopped right in front of you, and that's just a bad situation. So they need to get far enough away from those tracks to allow those 15, 20 vehicles to stop without being hindered at all. So I believe it's going north of that hotel because there's not enough room between the hotel and the tracks to allow enough vehicles to stack.
Will they change how Perkins enters into Cleveland? I mean, like, will they move that crossing north, or?
The crossing would stay right where it is. The roundabout, if you can picture Perkins coming east and west and then kind of veering northwest and northeasterly to a roundabout around that hotel, they would probably leave that little spur that continues to the parking lot, but that would be more of a private drive, private road, and they would cut it off so you can't go straight through. You'd have to actually drive around the hotel and back through. Now, again, that's not final design. That's just one of the concepts that's on the table, and that's why it's a 26, 27, 28 timeline for the project, because they still have to do a lot of acquisition, environmental and public outreach, and all the NEPA and ODOT stuff that's required.
Appreciate that. Thanks.
Bill?
The drawing I looked at just the other day, it looked like just the westbound lane went north of the hotel, the motel.
Okay.
That made sense. The more northern lane was, and the roundabout was kind of, the rest of it was kind of south of the motel, but keeping the westbound lane moving north of the motel.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah.
Yep.
But like you said, nothing's in concrete yet.
It'll be interesting to see what they do with that area because it's already a choke point.
Right. It's a tough.
Yeah, it's a tough thing to
that's
work
the
out.
biggest
Especially with the
puzzle.
grade difference.
And I think one of the biggest wins that ODOT got was that the railroad was part of it and actually putting some funding into the project as well, because they realized that that is one of the worst points in the state for them as well. So they want to make that correct and make it safe for people.
Judy?
Is that the same timeline for the one at Cedar Point Drive and Cleveland Road?
No, so the one at Cedar Point Drive was actually part of the same planning process, and both of them went for funding. The part that just got funded and that one went for funding. Fortunately, we got the funding for the Cedar Point Drive piece, so that's on a more aggressive timeline because we got that funding a few years ago. That one is intended to break ground in '24, fiscal year '24. I can't remember. I believe it might be the beginning of calendar year '24, if I remember correctly. We're trying to obviously time that one at the most appropriate time as well, which right now with the sports center, there's so much traffic all year that it's hard to find a convenient time.
I guess it's a good problem to have at that
It is.
point. Yes. All right. Any other questions on that project? It's going to be an amazing project to watch develop, that's for sure. Okay, the Causeway Wetlands?
Yes, that project, I know I reported previously that our portion of the project is complete. I wanted to bring to your attention that the dredging of the shipping channel is supposed to start sometime during the week of September 19th, weather pending. And that is the project that will be filling the diked perimeter that we have recently constructed. The way that that project will work is the barge will be sitting out in the dredging channel, doing the dredging as normal. They'll have the same pumps that they've always had and things like that. And they will have a second barge about 2,000 yards from the, or about 1,000 yards from the diked perimeter. The barge with the dredging material will then transport itself over to that second barge, that's where they will have the hydraulic pumps to pump underwater. There'll be a pipe that is intended to be completely submerged on the bottom that will be pumping it, and then they'll have it coming up along the Cedar Point Causeway, and it'll have an elbow on the top. And we're trying to figure out if we need a diffuser plate or how all that's going to work, but then they'll be pumping it and blowing it into the wetlands and moving around as they go. It is a 24/7 operation. It's always been a 24/7 operation, so I'm hoping that it doesn't negatively impact the area because it's really not much different than before. The only difference is that it's being placed along the causeway rather than out into the open lake. That's about a 3-week construction timeline. We did meet with Cedar Point Police yesterday, and ODNR and the Corps of Engineers and several others were on site to make sure that the coordination and the traffic control and all that stuff will be managed properly. That underwater pipe will have buoys and be very well delineated out there in the bay for maximum safety. But I do want to bring anybody that has a boat or intends to be out there, jet ski or anything else, I do want to bring your attention to it. I want to make sure that everybody is well aware that that is going on, and to just pay attention to the nautical devices, the warning signs that you would normally pay attention to, but these will be new ones, similar to driving on a road. If you see an orange barrel, don't hit it because something's happening. So, okay.
Well, I guess in that, if the ones that you really should make sure of is talking to the boat rental and the jet ski rental places that they let their operators know, because those tend to be the ones that certainly don't know the rules of the road to begin with.
Yeah, and I'm sorry.
Yes, Judy.
Is there a timeline before that area will be filled? Or is it never be filled? I don't know that.
Tentatively, yes. The the wetlands is supposed to take 2 to 3 dredging cycles. 2 for sure, possibly a third or a smaller third. Right now, they do the dredging annually, but they've talked about spacing it out and doing it every other year because it might not be needed annually. However, let's just, for example, say that it takes 2 dredging cycles, so that's 22, 23 timeline. It might take 4 or 5 years for those dredgings to compact enough so that we can reshape it into the wetlands that is to create that wildlife habitat. We don't know how long it's going to take to compact that material. Obviously, being in water, it's going to take a little bit longer to solidify and condense. So we're going to have to, we've already started doing some monitoring of the wetlands inside and outside. We're going to continue to do it, and after the material's placed, we're going to have to take core samples to figure out when it's the appropriate time to go back out and create that habitat for wildlife. So 2 to 3 to 4 years to fill it, and then another 4 years maybe to get it to its final state.
Then what happens once it's filled?
Excuse me?
What happens once it's filled? Where do you go from there?
With the dredging,
Yes.
that's one of the big questions that the state and federal government need to answer. We have done an RFQ for a second project. We haven't selected a site. We're debating right now whether we expand the current site to the south or we expand it to the west, or we're debating whether we go over to the west end of the city. There's also some sites that are being considered, but those sites would probably be outside the city, which I would then recuse myself from managing those projects. So it's really a dilemma since the state has implemented the ban on open lake disposal, that the federal government is really trying to figure out how to meet that. And there's not a lot of options because it has to be beneficially reused somehow, so you have to provide some avenue. And that's why it might be more economically feasible and chronologically feasible to dredge the shipping channel every other year rather than every year, because then you only have half the material to consider rather than.
One more question. When they do the project of widening the causeway, how does that affect the wetlands there?
The wetlands was designed to start 10 to 12 feet, actually 10 to 15 feet off the western edge of the causeway to allow for expansion to the west. We did that from the beginning, but to that same point, a structure like the causeway needs something to dissipate the energy from the waves, meaning a break wall. They need a lot of that. Well, we just installed that. So this should really help. We're designing the project to help their future potential expansion, but you know, they've got that ancillary benefit of having that breakwater to slow the waves down and help protect that shoreline in the future too.
Okay, thank you.
And I apologize, but one more point on this is we are getting public outreach documents from the Corps of Engineers. I got them a couple days ago, still reviewing them, but we are going to be sending that out. I'm hoping to get it up on social media. We're going to try to get it to the Coast Guard and any marinas that we can think of, and just let people know that it is out there, to your point earlier.
Great. Thank you. All right, then Columbus Avenue project.
Thank you. Thanks to those of you who answered our public survey we had out and helped us promote it. Just a little project update. So we ran that public survey for a couple weeks, and then we had 2 public events. We set up the concept boards at one of the Party at the Piers and got like about 100 people interacting with them. And then we also set up at the farmers market with a similar similar outreach, similar number of people communicating with us about the project, so that was really exciting. I heard a lot of verbal comments like, this is great, keep going, we love what you're doing downtown. This is going to be, the next logical piece from the transformation of Shoreline Drive and the pier to Columbus Avenue. I also heard a lot of people asking us to just completely shut down the street and make it a plaza, like why should we have any cars on it at all? So it's interesting to see the range of comments. We also got some press in the registers to help promote that public outreach portion of the project. So now we've made some updates based on those comments, and we are going to start meeting with the merchants and the business owners again along the corridor so they really understand what's happening at their front door. We're not at a foot detailed level at this point. We're still in schematic design, so we've gone from the 1,000-foot view to kind of looking at the 100-foot view and how does this actually start to work. So a lot of the questions that we've received so far have been very detailed, and we weren't quite ready to answer those questions yet, like exactly where will the accessible parking be and exactly how will this look. So we're getting further along the road to be able to communicate that with more illustrations. So the next big public involvement will be a presentation to City Commission at the end of the 30% design phase to show the concepts, and we'll have a lot more illustrations at that point that hopefully will get folks' questions answered. I can talk a little bit about what we've heard and then some of the questions I've seen come up, so you all know in case you have the same questions, and you can help communicate that to your friends and neighbors if they're asking you questions as well. So some of the things that people are really excited about the concept is that we'll have more and dedicated space for outdoor dining. We're going to be eliminating the conflict we have today where you see, you have to kind of weave through the people where there's tables and chairs outside, and sometimes you only have a foot to squeeze through, depending on how our restaurants are setting up their outdoor seating. So we'll have more and dedicated space for outdoor dining. We'll have a consistent and ample sidewalk space, so enough room to push a wheelchair, stroller, walker through. We'll have a significantly increased amenities, shade, seating, and lighting. I know that people are really excited about lighting. That's one of the things we've heard about most in the project was lighting. So we're planning for being able to light up the trees, doing any, having the typical lighting along the roadway, and then the design includes festoon lighting, so catenary lighting across the street, so when you're experiencing it, it kind of feels like you're in a room, and we're looking carefully at how that lines up with the arch over Shade Mylander Plaza, because the views to the water are the paramount, the showcase of Columbus Avenue, so the views of the water are also really important being considered. And that it's a fresh new design, so stepping up our level of design in Columbus Avenue to better match the other improvements that have been made downtown. And we can use this as, it'll be the most aggressive pedestrian space, or not aggressive, I say, it's like the most, it's our main street, so the streetscape on Columbus Avenue will be more robust than the rest of downtown, but we can take some design cues and how we do Columbus Avenue to spread those around downtown as we get to it. Because I've also heard hey, Market Street needs done, hey, Water Street needs done. And I know the Public Works has been working on updating some of those as well. So some of the things that we've heard, parking, of course, comes up, and that's, it's very important to have a balanced roadway. We know that today it's overly car-focused Columbus Avenue is, just like Shoreline Drive was. One of the things I think that people are concerned about is that the drive lanes will be really narrow. I hear a lot of comments that people are stressed out when they drive down Shoreline Drive, and so I wanted to just articulate that those drive lanes on Shoreline Drive are as small as possible, and that was a deliberate design decision to highly prioritize bicyclists and pedestrians on Shoreline. So those drive lines are real tight, and that's on purpose because it gave as much room as possible to pedestrians and bicyclists. What we're looking at, the design for Columbus Avenue, is a balanced roadway. So the drive lanes are still 11, 12 feet. They'll feel very comfortable. There's parking lanes, and then there's the sidewalks and space for the retail frontage and outdoor dining. So it's rebalancing the roadway so everybody gets more of an equal amount of space rather than it being car focused as it is today. But that doesn't mean that cars won't have access. So we'll have accessible parking, we'll have comfortable drive lanes. One thing that was not in the public survey that's in the concepts, and that you'll see that in the next round of the illustrations, is we are looking at adding angled parking on the block on the east side from Washington Street to Adams, which will increase the number of parking spaces that can be regularly used by the courthouse, and also customer parking for folks coming down down the street. So that addition of angled parking, another thing that we've been collaborating with Public Works that Josh is working on is when Washington Row gets restriped and redone, he's going to tip that angle just a couple degrees, which will sneak in a few more parking spaces. So we're going to add some there. And then we're working on a concept for the hotel on Jackson Street parking lot. As you know, a lot of people have the perception that that's going to take away parking from that parking lot, and it will not. We're going to add parking because that will be a mixed-use project that includes a public parking garage. So we will increase the amount of parking on the garage. And you'll notice that this is a very retail-focused, Main Street-focused design that does take away some of the parking in these two blocks that are currently angled spaces, because we're going to parallel, but by replacing them just as close, we get the benefits of that pedestrian experience, of the walkability, of the extra outdoor dining. So it will be a more vibrant corridor that works for everybody, and we still will have parking spaces. We're looking at like I said, we're getting into more details, so we're looking at drop-off spaces. So if you want to run in and get a cup of coffee, you have a spot that you can pull into quickly. If you are not able to walk even from the parking garage, at Jackson Street parking lot to the State Theater for a show, that you'll be able to get dropped off. There'll be a valet kind of spot where they can block off a couple spaces to do a pull-off. So all of those things we're considering in the design. Another thing I wanted to mention is signage and visibility. So right now, a lot of people aren't seeing the parking garage and how you get in and out of it. The current county parking garage, we're also looking at a special, kind of almost like a landing footprint, so that the material or the pattern or the treatment of the sidewalk will change when you're in front of Peddler's Alley and in front of the covered alley that leads to those other parking resources. So it'll be much more connected from the street and intuitive to people to see that the Columbus Avenue is connected to those parking resources. Another thing I mentioned accessibility already with the drop-offs. We will be working on a parking management strategy. Another thing that I've, talked to folks about is especially with aging population in Sandusky, which we have, and nationwide, people are like, well, I need to park really close. And part of our job is to make sure that the employees and the owners of those properties are not parked right out in front of their front door, that they're in the garages and that they're a couple blocks away or a block away or in the garage, so that those spaces are open for folks that need to park really closely. And right now, we're not doing a lot of parking management. Before the pandemic, the planning team had been working on parking management strategy, and that all kind of got stalled. So that's something that we're looking forward to as well. I mentioned the Shoreline Drive lanes. So overall, I'm really excited about the project. I think it's going really well. It's building. It's gotten more beautiful, more sensitive, and just really a lot more detailed since the concept we adopted in the downtown plan. And we're looking forward to those next round of conversations, and then to build some really great renderings and illustrations to really communicate that project to everyone.
Thank you. Bill, I saw you.
Two questions. One about, you were talking about tree lighting downtown. I'll put on my Mr. Zuloff hat and mention.
I was right with you
I was
there.
wondering if you're going to
And
answer.
mention that, pretty much against any uplighting from a light pollution standpoint. My other question was, you said going to increase parking on Washington, between Wayne and Adams?
Yes.
So
On Columbus Ave between Washington and Adams. So right now, on this side, it's
okay.
parallel. On that side, it's angled. We're
Got
going
it.
to add angled on this side, which gives us like
Increase.
30
Got it.
more spaces, I think, something like that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Through the chair. if I could.
Yes.
I do have first of all, I think the plan, from what I've seen so far, is great. I do like the expanded outdoor seating opportunities there and the walkways, and I do like the lighting concept also. I I was also with Sandusky Main Street for many years, and we did parking studies and all of those other factors, and we had basically a lot of extra parking in downtown Sandusky, but since then, we have removed a lot of those areas that at one time were parking venues. Are we doing any type of a new study on this to look at net gain, net loss on parking with this project?
That, a full-on downtown parking study is something I'm really interested in, particularly the addition of BGSU and the students and the new businesses on the east side of downtown, I think have really changed the east side of downtown in ways that weren't on the radar 5 or 8 years ago. We really do look at downtown parking as a system, and we're trying for a park once opportunity where people who are able to park one time and walk around feel comfortable doing so and can get around. We're looking at a general inventory of spaces, like public and private parking spaces that are available in downtown as part of this study. And, we know that people are really sensitive to the number of spaces, so that's why we're trying to see if we can get to break even and not really lose a lot of spaces and still gain what we want to gain with the Columbus Avenue project. So I would say there's a light touch of parking analysis that's going on here, but it's something that's definitely on my radar to think about parking management. If we have a parking study and we have those updated numbers, we have a parking management strategy where we take a look at the signage, the 2-hour spaces, the 4-hour spaces, are those in the right place? Should we redo that? How we're managing the downtown resident parking space permit program, because we have an increased number of downtown residents. So I think there's a lot of factors that would really warrant somebody that specializes in parking taking a look at that for us and helping with this strategy for the next 5 years. So that's something I've been socializing within the community development department to see if I can get something on the budget for that.
I do believe the last parking study was done, it's been probably about 10 years now. And I do believe the city did receive a copy of that, so it should be available. Again, the other factor on that with the parking is timing, because we can say we will have more parking with a new parking garage, but this project's going to be sooner, I would believe, and completed sooner before that parking garage even becomes to fruition. So just keep it in mind, because you don't want people yelling at you.
Absolutely, I appreciate that. And one thing I want to put out there, since we're in a public meeting, I think something that I've seen in a lot of other cities that I don't see here is people who own parking lots selling special event parking spaces for $10 or $20 on days they know it's going to be a lot. Like there's the Social Security lot that's empty on the weekends. There's a lot right next to the parking garage that's mostly empty most of the time. There's one over that looked like maybe an old bank right across from the BP on West Washington that's empty most of the time. So there's some money to be made on parking, especially during special events for people that own lots right now, and I think that's an advantage. Maybe something that hasn't dawned on those owners that I see in lots of other cities, that there's probably some opportunity to expand publicly available parking during the times where we're experiencing that pressure when we have a lot of people coming into town.
David, I saw you had your hand up.
Oh, I defer to Judy. because
Okay.
She always has interesting stuff to say.
Thanks.
Wouldn't argue with that.
Have you talked to the county about the possibility of raising the levels of their parking garage?
The conversations we had with the county were about potentially a project to beautify it, to add signage. I don't know that we've breached the conversation if that structure could handle more floors. What else? Oh, they're also interested in seeing if they could create a public access on Columbus Avenue, so you could actually walk into it and out of it from Columbus Ave and not just Market Street. So we've had a couple conversations about making that parking more accessible. I do know that the planning team, before I joined, I think it was in 2018, they did a study in-house and just counted how many spaces there were in the parking garage, and it was vastly underutilized. I think every time they counted it, it was at least 80% empty. And so people are not using it to the extent that they could be using it for sure. I have done a lot of observations in my year here. I went and counted spaces during Bike Week. It was empty then because we had reserved it for the motorists. During the car show, it's empty because they want it reserved for if it rains. But it was the first week in the Memorial Day weekend. It had just like 2 empty spaces. So like we're having like, the Black Friday sort of thing. Like every once in a while it's full, but almost always it's only got 20% full, 15% full.
Because I've been told that the county has the accessibility of adding more
It was designed.
levels to it.
It
It was designed, that's what I thought
It was
too.
either 1 or 2 more levels that could be added to it.
Okay, just an option.
See, I'm glad I waited for Judy, and I was ready to chime in with, yeah, I'd heard it was designed for a couple more floors. But having been in and out of that parking garage for a number of years, it makes so much obvious sense to have access from Columbus Avenue. And I know that was discussed when they talked about apartments here and stuff. Like if you have a unit here, it'd make a lot of sense carrying your groceries just across the street instead of around the block and such. But my comment and then eventually a question, the buzz I'm getting from the people I interact with is they're just excited about the renaissance of downtown, that even people that were formerly pretty skeptical about the Jackson Street Pier rejuvenation cannot protest the obvious fact that it's had a lot of enjoyment this summer. That's the rec department has cranked up the programming down there and whatever. People are massively appreciating that. So I can see that bleeding into the Columbus Avenue project. For example, that Cedar Point antique car, whatever, that's sitting down on the plaza, sort of helping to fill the niche of the Sandusky wall photo op that's no longer there. I've seen a lot of photo ops at that car. And this leads to the question, at one time, I think in the downtown plan, there was discussion about whether it should include a significant renovation of the Shade Mylander Plaza. And, I'm personally not sure that should be a focus yet, that's still underappreciated and growing appreciation for that area. But where is that in the comments, and what are people saying about that now?
Oh, thanks for that question. Through the chair, I don't recall that we've gotten any questions about Shade Mylander in this scope of Columbus Avenue. We chose to leave it out of the scope of the project. We are going to be sensitive to how the Columbus Avenue project meets Shade Mylander Plaza, that particularly the curb there, the crossings across Water Street. The sense we got from the downtown plan is that it was a mixed bag of whether a lot of people think that it was not time to think about a new concept for Shade Mylander, that changing it at this point wasn't popular. We did hear several comments throughout the stakeholder engagement and the public engagement that they love the idea of a Shade Mylander Plaza redo, that if it were more flexible for events, it could be maybe more utilized, and how it meets the water and how it meets these new projects. I have a suspicion that once we redo Columbus Avenue and we have Shoreline's been redone, Columbus Avenue's been redone, it's going to start to look like it needs a refresh, because that just the naturally aging of the structures itself, that it's going on 20, I think. So I haven't seen it come up. It's certainly on the radar. There is that just really simple draft concept in the downtown plan. But yeah, I think I imagine that conversation is a couple years down the road.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I also just wanted to add a comment as well, in reference to the Shade Mylander Plaza. I think it also, just be in our best interest too, to also just see what eventually happens with the redevelopment of the Beckling building too, because that'll certainly be what's a very unique piece, but also I'm sure it'll play a pretty strong, role in a future vision for, the Shade Mylander Plaza, so.
Big impact on traffic in that, foot traffic in that area and the usage. Sure. Bill?
So along those lines, that's exactly what I was wondering if what discussion has gone on about the Beckling building and that pier. Obviously, that's going to be a monumental project. That whole pier is, I'm sure, engineering-wise, not great shape.
We've had some preliminary conversations with the Jet about some short-term architectural appearance cleanup type things that they'd like to see. We do have a report from Cedar Fair as well about the pier. To me, the big thing is that it floods. The infrastructure is obviously the infrastructure. It's going to be similar to what the Jackson Street Pier was, that you've got the sheet pile walls, and as long as it's holding everything in, it's compacted, but it's just really low. There's some more work that needs to be done to figure out a fix for that. And then there's definitely a big planning process that would need to be done for the Beckling itself, as well as the Jet Pier, to figure out exactly the best layout, use, all of that other stuff. I think in the short term, our hope is to do what we can to make is going to be, and again, we're very preliminary, even just having a phone call or two, but we don't even own the property. So it's very preliminary just with the Jet about how we can make it more appealing and more accessible and more usable for them in the meantime while we're developing that bigger planning design process.
I did get the opportunity to take a look inside the Beckling building recently. Jason had the keys for some reason. He had to give them back, but it was cool walking around that building, kind of thinking about what it could be. Historic preservation, I think many of you know, is one of my passions, and just that, the architecture of that structure, the history of the structure and its location has a huge opportunity to be an impactful activator building for downtown. One of the hardest things in retail design and public space design is getting people to turn a corner. It's one of the reasons why people will feel totally comfortable walking half a mile in the mall, because they can see the door from their parking space, but they don't want to walk half a mile downtown, even though that would be multiple blocks away to get to Daly's to go to lunch, for example. So the Beckling building, activating that will really help people turn the corner from Water to and Shoreline up Columbus Avenue. And I continue to see that vision that we adopted in the downtown plan, where you have some kind of like casual food and beverage option when you get off the Jet Express, that people stop there for a locally crafted beverage or some French fries for the kids, and they meant to go to Vermilion, but heck, it's 2 hours later, and then maybe they'll spend the whole night in downtown Sandusky instead. And maybe there's other, like a marketplace sort of type of thing, or there's a finer dining option where you could sit on the patio and look upon the pier when there's a concert going on, and have a nice steak while, the band is playing, right? So that I think that there's a lot of opportunity for that structure to be possibly an incubator space for smaller businesses, have some office uses on the second floor, be kind of a marketplace. Even the pier structure itself, I think there's a lot of real estate there. If we're able to take on the infrastructure challenges, making sure it doesn't flood, then we have a whole covered floor plan that could be outdoor vendor space and activation as well. There's a lot of opportunity there.
David?
I'm reluctant to bring up something completely different, but the segue is an underutilized pier. And it's come up recently, the Meg Street Pier, just going straight down Meg Street, that's a structure that there's not a lot goes on there, that seems like it's a piece of infrastructure that is really valuable and completely underutilized, or significantly underutilized. Anybody ever talk about that, or any future dreams? Like, what did the downtown master plan say about that? I don't really remember anything related to that specifically.
As far as the Meg Street Pier, the Washington Street Pier, and Sandusky Bay Pavilion in Battery Park, I mean, you've got a huge amount of public resources there that have so much opportunity to be activated, like you say, to increase access to the waterfront. I'd love to see if and when we get development on Battery Park, that really ties into increasing waterfront access all around the corner of the bay, those views, the Meg Street Pier, the skate park, drawing people in to enjoy that resource, the Sandusky Bay Pavilion site, which right now is just kind of like a every once in a while event space, but other than that, it's not programmed. There's a lot of opportunity there on that side of town to really have some great public spaces.
Any other questions or comments? Good thoughts.
One other question.
Judy.
Bringing this up, how much of the Battery Park area is leased by Maroos Brothers?
Yeah, the Meg Street Pier is leased by them. The perimeter around it, off of the Meg Street Pier. If you go north on the Meg Street Pier and go to the right, that is leased by them. The only piece of that is not is the riprap on the perimeter on probably 2/3 of it. If you go down the Water Street side and continue down Water, that pier that's kind of between the sailing club and the Battery Park Marina, that a portion of that is leased by them, including the pier wall that goes out along the eastern or northern side, however you want to look at it. And then all the way down to the city parking lot. So including the tennis courts, I believe, is within their lease. Quite a bit of that is submerged land as well, so there is a submerged land lease out there too. And that's one of the limiting factors to the question earlier about being that the Meg Street Pier is within their lease, it's under their control as well to do the events and do those things that has to all go through them. So it's not just a city thing, but it's also a lease thing with them.
Is the Washington Street Pier included in that or no?
The Washington Street Pier, no, that is not. That is city, I believe. There's a piece, I'd have to look at the sailing club's lease to figure that out. I can't remember if that's included in theirs or not, or a portion of it. But I think that might be
Inner
the
aspect of
city.
the basin is Sadler Sailing Basin, and then the walkway and
Yeah,
southeast is city.
yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, all good questions. Any other items? Any other old business that anyone has? David?
Oh, maybe a quick one. No answer. The south of Cleveland Road, across from the Loop, that wetlands area back there, what, is the city involved in getting access to parking or availability to get back to there? And is that envisioned ever to be a city park property, or would that more likely be Metro or something else?
South of Cleveland Road, where was
Yeah,
that?
So he's, so right, that small overpass right there, in between, Sartino's place and the Loop, correct?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Where they, many times people pull off to fish right there.
Oh, that area. Yeah, no, that's not something that we've been trying to acquire. I know the gentleman that owned that when we were doing a sewer project.
Just east of there, there's that Cedar Point Maintenance Building, that big parking
Amazement,
lot.
okay.
And then back,
Yes.
there's that pier or
Okay. Where Bree Holman
Yeah.
had done her wetlands project.
Yeah.
No, we haven't had any conversations with Cedar Fair about that. I know they still own that. They're interested in keeping that parking right now, designated for the maybe overflow for Castaway Bay, but also they are looking at needing it for staff that live across the street in the condos or apartments or whatever you want to call those in the buildings that they have there. So right now, those conversations haven't been had. I have to imagine that when the pathway gets through there and we get the sidewalk on the north side and hopefully sidewalk all the way along the south side of Cleveland Road and that type of thing, that's going to be a location that's looked at. But right now, there hasn't been any discussions that I'm aware of with Cedar Fair or from the county or anybody. When I say the county, I mean the Soil and Water District, about public access to that wetlands area that they did.
Thanks.
Sorry,
Stevens.
one more question. The billboards on the south side of Cleveland Road at that Cedar Point Drive, Route 6 intersection, will they remain throughout this project? To me, personal comment, they're an incredible eyesore when you've got a nice wetlands behind them. Would love to see them go away, but that's a personal preference.
I'm going to tread lightly here because we're still in negotiations with that property owner, but that property is certainly a topic that we're trying to figure out what to do with, because the current property owner definitely has some access limitations, because that little triangle that billboard is on was separated and sold. So now he owns that, but he doesn't technically have access through the neighboring property, and we don't want to provide a driveway on our roundabout. So we're going through that negotiation with him to try to figure out what can and should happen at that site.
Thank you.
All right, great discussion. Any other old business? And community input, we don't have any general public here today. Commissioner Harris, any additional input tonight, this morning, I should say?
No, college football's coming back.
Yeah, there we
so,
go.
Yeah,
All right.
should be a great weekend.
$8. All right, we'll take a motion to adjourn then?
So moved.
And adjourn.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you very much for all your input.
Yes, thank you.